start recording. And since you're the only one here, you can just ask questions whenever you feel like it. So, I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to go over here. Right. There you go. So this is about a introduction to worker cooperatives. And the funny thing with worker cooperatives is there really is no universally accepted definition of worker cooperatives. And that's the beauty of it, because then it really people can design their own worker cooperative the way they want them. Oh, David is here.
Yep.
How are you
Hi.
doing?
Hi. I was taking a nap.
You're taking a nap. That's you're never late. So let me just make introduction here. Elliot Portman, the premier collection attorney in New York, right?
Oh, if you say so.
And David Sprinson is
Far from that.
professor of philosophy, right?
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So we're talking about worker cooperatives, and a lot of the questions that I get most often are two questions. One is worker cooperatives unions? Does it have to do anything to do with unions? And the other question I get is it socialism? And the first question is that it's not unions, because in worker cooperatives, there are no employers and workers against each other. They are all on the same side of the table. So the traditional role of unions is not really there. However, a lot of worker cooperatives are started by unions, and they continue to be unionized even after they have been independent worker cooperatives for years. So that's a little bit of a funny thing. I think unions will have to redefine their role, perhaps become more as technical assistants. They have a lot of experience with running businesses. And the other questions about if it's socialism or not, I can't answer that for you because I have no idea. And one of the reasons I can't do that is because the definition of socialism is kind of fluid. Nobody really knows what it is anymore. There's many different things to different people. But I do know a couple of things. I do know that worker cooperatives and cooperatives in general are privately owned. They're not owned by the state like you have seen in some socialist countries. And they are for profit. They are there to make money for their benefits, for the member benefits, and they are democratically controlled. So I mentioned before that the beauty of worker cooperatives is that you can design your workplace the way you want it. So everybody has one share, everybody has one vote. So that's the best I can do in terms of defining what a cooperative is.
Yeah, you know, especially in larger cooperatives, the way the unions have functioned, and they do it and that's the reason for the connection with the steel workers in Mondragon, is that the worker cooperatives elect a board of directors which runs the operation, and which is responsible to and reportable back to the workers. But the day-to-day problems that take place, like on the shop floor, as it were, are often matters that are matters which are dealt with by the unions. But in the case of the Bronx Home Care Cooperative, they affiliated with the union, SEIU local, precisely because, among other things, it would give them more political clout in Albany with
Yeah.
respect to the funding, for the because most of what their income comes from is really state funding for home health care,
Yeah, Medicaid.
Medicaid stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and there's also another one.
There are ways in which they can work very much together, especially if you have, especially if it's more than just a cooperative of 5 or 10 people.
Yeah. And New Era Windows in Chicago
Yes,
that was closed.
right.
And the union, they were unionized before. And the union people were the ones who knew who to call. They called
Right.
the working world and they got it all set up for them. And now
Right.
they're still unionized there, yeah.
Right. That
So
was
unions-
the electrical workers. That was
Yeah.
the electrical workers.
That is right.
Yeah.
So, next slide. So there really are different kinds of cooperatives, and worker cooperatives is just one out of 3. I'm just gonna go switch my screen here for a second to show you something that you probably do not know. I'm gonna go here for a second because I found these facts about cooperatives. Here. And what it says is that there are 29,000 cooperatives in the United States. And 1 in 3 Americans are a member of a cooperative. See, this is statistics that nobody knows. And there are 900, just a little bit down here on the screen. There are 900 electric companies, and they generate 42% of the nation's electric distribution, covering 75% of our land mass. I don't know what that means.
Oh, you mean generating electricity?
Yeah.
On Long Island, it's Loco or LIPA, things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not that they cover most of the country, but not most of the people.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
So, and
we tried to get that here. That was
yeah.
the original reason for the creation of the Long Island Power Authority.
Yeah, right.
When they got serious about that, they took away the popular representation.
Yeah. Cuomo appoints the board of directors for the LIPA.
Well, it was Cuomo's senior who
Yeah.
actually first created the Long Island Power Authority,
Yeah.
and secondly, when they were serious about, turning it over to turning Luco over to it, they
Yeah.
changed it from elective board to an appointed one.
Yeah. So there are 2 million people working in cooperatives in the United States. Again, nobody knows that. And they generate $652 billion in sales. So, I mean, this is staggering statistics. So let's just get back to the slideshow here and talk about, can you see that now? Kinds of cooperatives? No, you can't.
No, it was there before.
Yeah. I gotta learn how to do this faster. Share my screen here.
This is becoming essential for people now.
Yeah.
I have 2 different board meetings this weekend, and they're both of them going to be on Zoom.
Zoom,
I
yeah.
don't know if anybody knows how to operate it.
Yeah.
Finn's learning on the fly. We
Yeah.
all are.
I've done it a couple of times now by now, so I should.
Finn has some experience. I have none.
So since there are so many different kinds of cooperatives, you just go through them real quick. The three groups: consumer cooperatives, we know credit unions are, grocery store, a lot of grocery stores are, and we talked about the 900 electric cooperatives before. Those are all consumer cooperatives. member-owned companies for the benefit of those members. And then the second category is producer cooperatives. They are popular in the agricultural business. For example, Land O'Lakes is a cooperative. They're owned by farmers. I bet you most people in the grocery stores have no idea that this is happening.
I don't know. I just used their cream today for coffee.
Right?
And
Oh.
they're owned by a network of farmers. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Farmers own.
Is
And
that also true of Cabot cheese?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So Ace Hardware stores is they don't really produce anything, but they're still in this category of producer cooperatives because they are like the farmers who use the cooperatives to sell their products. Ace Hardware stores use cooperatives as a way of buying stuff. So instead of each individual store buying 10 hammers, they can now collectively buy 10,000 hammers and distribute them among themselves. And they can also have marketing cooperatively. Florida's Natural orange juice is owned not by citrus farmers, but by associations of citrus farmers. It's a little bit more complicated, but the concept is the same, really. And then finally, the last category is the one we're talking about, worker cooperatives. So, and you already mentioned, David, the Cooperative Home Care Associates in the Bronx.
Yeah, the Bronx. Yeah, that's that's over 2,000 people.
Yeah, but I don't know that they're all members, though. The statistics on it is a little different depending on who you ask. So I think it changes a lot over time, really.
Right.
I don't know. But one of the benefits that's really clear in this place is that I saw somebody saying that the industry in home health care turnover rate is about 65% every year. But in cooperative home care associates, it's only 15%. So people can stick around a lot more than they do in other regular companies.
So the Yes We Can, Si Se Pueda, home care group in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
It's really quite a successful recent startup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Union Cab is another union-initiated company. It's in Madison, Wisconsin. The cab drivers were locked out. They were not on strike. They were locked out. And then they said, okay, the union said, let's just start our own. And they did. And this is one of the larger, actually 5 out of the 10 largest worker cooperatives in the United States are taxi companies. I think the largest is in Austin or Denver or something like that. So this is the kind of companies that are cooperatives. Most consumers just don't know it. All right, so since we were talking about worker cooperatives, and then connected to that, there are other ways for workers to own.
Did you say, by the way, Finn, did you say that Norton Books was not actually a cooperative? It was a ESOP or something? I'm just trying, because I know they promote themselves as, I mean, it says worker owned, for example. I'm just looking at their webpage now, and I know that they promoted themselves at the philosophy convention as I don't know whether they said worker owned or worker cooperative. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I don't know about that one, but
I'm trying to see what it says here.
See, these are two concepts that are often confused. Like we saw before, almost nobody knows about cooperatives, but a lot of business owners do know about employee stock ownership plans. And those have been around since 1970s or so.
Yeah. It says here, independent since 1923, employee owned, and proud to publish books that live. But that, I guess that doesn't make the question clear, right?
Right, because the employee ownership could mean two things. It can mean either employee stock ownership plan, or it can mean a worker cooperative.
Yeah.
So we can get into a little bit about the differences
Okay. All right.
between these categories. But an employee stock ownership plan is basically a pension plan, and and it's like a 401k plan in many ways. But instead of having cash in your plan, you have company stock. But you don't own the stock directly. It is held in trust for you, in an account for you by a trustee that's appointed by the employer. Which means, again, that you don't really have any control because the trustee votes your shares, which happened to New Belgium Brewery not too long ago. So Kirin Brewery, a Japanese company, came in and bid a lot for New Belgium Brewery, and the trustee could not refuse it because the fiduciary responsibility is to the shareholders, not the employees. The employees did not want to be sold to Kirin, but because they were shareholders, and the trustee had to then sell the shares to Kirin, and now it's part of Kirin. So this is one of the weaknesses about employee stock ownership plans. The workers don't have control, and they are vulnerable to these hostile takeovers. The largest employee stock ownership, 100% owned, employee owned, is public supermarkets in the southeast, Florida and around there. I think 150,000 owners. And then there's something new, employee stock ownership trusts. Sometimes they're also called stewardship trusts because there could be multiple groups of stakeholders in them. So not all of them may be employees. It could be customers who have an interest in this company surviving. So they join together with the employees and form a stewardship trust. And there's a couple of examples. Metis Construction is in Seattle. It's obviously a construction company. And Organically Grown Company converted from an employee stock ownership plan to employee ownership trust, precisely to avoid this situation where they could be taken over by somebody else. I think they're also in Seattle. And then finally, the last type of employee ownership is the worker cooperative that is the topic of this discussion. And one of them is Equal Exchange. It's in Massachusetts, and they import coffee, cocoa, and a bunch of other things from third world countries. And not only that, they also help the third world farmers start farming cooperatives to produce, the coffee and the beans that they sell to the cooperatives, so that they are not exploiting these workers in these third world countries. They help them get started. All right. So, any questions up to this point?
What would you mean, Finn?
Yeah.
I don't want to push. I'm just trying to understand this. On the Norton page, it says that that following Norton's death, Norton's stockholders agreement codified a system whereby the firm continues to be owned wholly by active employees. No market exists outside the firm for its stock. What does that mean?
I don't know. It sounds like a trust.
It sounds like a trust, but it sounds like no one else can own the stock but the employees.
Except employees, yeah.
So I don't know.
So it's probably still an ESOP. It could still be an ESOP then, because
but it could be an ESOP, but it could be a way in which the ESOP guarantees the workers control of the operation of the company. Right. Anyway, I don't know. Because I know I talked with them once, and they were the people I dealt with were very positive about their sense of their control.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, but go ahead. It's fascinating.
Anything, Elliot, you want to pitch in or?
Well, I've been listening, and I'm kind of absorbing the information as you throw it at me.
Yeah, I've thrown some things at you before, so I know it's not quite new. So next
But it's still
slide.
fascinating.
What is it?
A great concept.
Yeah, it is. Did you know that, by the way, that law firms are essentially cooperatives?
Cooperative to the extent that the partners and the principals of the firm,
but not this
but not
support staff.
necessarily the employees.
Right, but there's really nothing that stops you from letting them participate in control.
True.
Have pizza on Fridays. You could decide to do that cooperatively.
Yeah, but probably what stops them is the number of employees' names they can put in the title of the firm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and there's nothing that stops you from sharing your profits with your employees, the janitor and the secretary.
We call that end of the year bonuses, yes.
Yeah.
But lawyers cannot split their legal fees with non-lawyers.
No, they can't, but they can. They don't have to keep it all. They can give it to other people, right?
Yes, we always put some aside for the employees and their bonuses.
Yeah.
Raises, yes.
Yeah, they can't.
What's
They
your
can't
law
split
firm?
it.
Elliot? What's your law firm?
Mine is Portman Law Group in Hauppauge.
Oh,
I was a partner in a larger firm about 5 years ago.
oh, okay, all right.
A lot more employees then.
So, yeah. Next slide. So now we're going to get into a little bit about history of worker cooperatives. I don't know. Are you bored? So I think it's important to kind of remember some of the ancient history of worker cooperatives, because there are some movements around the country about how you develop worker cooperatives nowadays, and that's dramatically different from how you did it 50 years ago. And David, I know you heard about the evergreen cooperatives in Cleveland.
Right, sure.
Right. So this is one way of doing it, where you kind of like do it from the top down. But it really started from the bottom up in the 1844 in England during the Industrial Revolution, where people were streaming from the country to cities to get better working condition, earn more money, get better working conditions. The reality for them, though, was that they didn't really get better working conditions. They were actually worse. So at some point in 1844, a bunch of textile workers in Rochdale, England, got together. And there's actually a little movie about that I can share with you if you want. They got 23 pounds, which was probably a huge sum of money at that point. And instead of buying grocery in the grocery store in the town, they now went to Manchester and bought eggs, milk, and whatever they could get for 23 pounds and brought it back and sold it to their members. And that's how the first grocery cooperative started. And then later on, they also bought their own loom so that they could now weave cloth, in essentially competing with their previous employers. But they did one really important thing, and that's really what we have inherited from these people, is the Rochdale principles. We have 7 of them, and we'll get back to that a little bit later. But they the vast majority of cooperatives worldwide have adopted these principles in one form or another. Maybe sometimes they have a little extra, maybe 7 or 8, or sometimes they have only 6, but essentially these are the same principles that they started with in 1844, and that's why they're so important. And the other reason they're so important is that these were people who had their backs against the wall and found a way around it, found a way to survive in times where they were really destitute, basically. So that was the first milestone that we had. The next one was in Mondragon, Spain, in 1956, 55, I think, actually. Spain had that time gone through the Second World War, which devastated most of Europe. And on top of that, they also had a civil war, which made it even worse. And times were really, really bad. Until a Catholic priest in the town of Mondragon in the northwestern Spain I think he was running a little technical college, and the students there decided to start producing some, I don't know, some say it was a stove, or some others say it was something else. But the point is that they started producing something to make money, and they did it by themselves. It wasn't like they went to work for somebody else. And their concept was taken up by others in the area, and by 1959, they pooled all their personal money and the company's money and started a bank. And that was really when the cooperative movement took off, because now they had a funding source. And by 2014, there are now 74,000 worker owners in the Mondragon area. And they have actually expanded down to South America and other places as well. Another milestone that I consider very important is November 11, 2001, when especially for our area here, when the World Trade Center collapsed. And there was a restaurant on top of one of the buildings, and the owners found another place where they could, start another restaurant, but they did not, as the employees had expected. The employees expected that they would be hired back once they had a new place, but that didn't happen. So they got together, they raised $2 million and started a restaurant called Colors in New York City, in Manhattan. It's still there today, but it's not a cooperative anymore. Now it's a nonprofit educational institution for restaurant and bar owners. You can learn how to become a bartender there, and you can learn how to be wait staff. And that happened in, I believe, 2006 or something like that. Yeah. And another milestone that happened was Green Worker Cooperatives in the Bronx. I think that was started in 2013, where they have actually incubated a lot of worker cooperatives in the city. And around that time also, all the worker cooperatives in the city got together and formed New York City network of worker cooperatives, and convinced the city council that they should set aside money for worker cooperative development, and they did. I think the last year, it was around $3 million or so that they have access to. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the milestones. So now in Long Island here, we don't have any worker cooperatives at all. And it's like really, really weird, because they have it everywhere else in the country and nothing around here. So yeah, but we're working on that. That's why we're here today. So, and next, this is where we come to the 7 principles that we were talking about before, that even the UN, the ICA, the International Cooperative Alliance, which is an arm under the UN, have adopted these 7 principles. So a lot of principles, a lot of worker, not just worker cooperatives, but cooperatives in general around the world. There are lots of cooperatives in India and Africa, and they all use these principles. And if you look at them, they become more and they have a progression from the individual more and more up to the community level. So it starts with voluntary and open membership. Anybody can become a member, as long as you can't just walk in and say, I want to be a member. They have to be willing to. We're running out of time, so we'll have to wrap it up real quick. So yeah, as long as you can deal with the rules and regulations that the cooperative has adopted, then you can become a member. So that's how open it is. So we can next time go into some of these other principles that they have. So the intention is to have these consumer-oriented webinars, maybe every 2 or 3 weeks, so that we can eventually get it spread out over Long Island. So I think we'll stop here, and then any questions? We have a few minutes left. We can do that.
It was a terrific presentation. Thank you, Finn.
I'll be happy to do that anytime for anybody. One at a time, and 100 or 100, it doesn't matter.
I appreciate the commitment you have, as you know. So it's I wish we could find enough people to sort of create a kind of working group. That would be a tremendous accomplishment. But
yeah, that is actually the goal, that we can, that other people would take it
Elliot,
over.
if you know any people you think might be interested, speak to them, because it would be good if we could get together a group anywhere from 5 to 10 people that could be a kind of working group to begin to to work with the organizations that already exist, etc., to try and begin to maybe help create 1 or 2 local cooperatives and figure out a way to begin to publicize it more widely on Long Island. There is a major movement. It's out there, but and it has possibilities.
Talk to your groups.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway,
thank you
both
for coming.
Let me tell you, Finn, by the way, just as that the Green Working Cooperatives had just recently affiliated with the New York State, community equity agenda.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Of course, NICNAC, which you mentioned, the network of New York City cooperatives, has been a member from the beginning.
Yeah.
The Green Worker Cooperatives has affiliated also as of a month ago or so.
Yeah.
Right. So that's in the context of, really, from my point of view, one of the key things that the cooperative agenda, that the equity agenda is promoting, is the state bank, or right now it's trying to promote legislation which would make it easier for any municipality to create their own bank, and that could be a big step in the direction of promoting cooperatives. So and there is legislation now out there, and there are champions in the state Senate that are pushing that. So
good. Yeah. So thank you for coming, and I hope to see you in another couple of weeks again.
Yep.
We'll
Okay.
continue this discussion.
Great, David.
Good meeting you, Elliot.
Nice to meet you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.